Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tasmin. If you're by any chance new here, I mostly make content about my life on the Azores archipelago, where I'm currently renovating a 200-year-old house. But I do have a background in German booktube back in the day, and I love to read books. And on the side of that, I'm also an environmentalist. I work in the environmental space and I'm very passionate about it. So last year I, for the first time, came up with the CLIMATHON, which is a readathon all about climate change and nature. Last year the CLIMATHON happened in September. This year that was not possible for me due to renovation chaos and everything like that. I'm still not in our own house. We're still in a temporary solution. My life is still very much chaotic, but I still want to host the CLIMATHON. So this year the CLIMATHON is going to happen in the month of November. It is going to be throughout the entire month of November, which means you can perfectly combine it with non-fiction November and also with the blooming readathon, if you so wish. And yeah, now I'm gonna introduce you to the readathon because it is a bit different from what it was last year and also different from the mini round that we did in January. So I've changed not really the rules, but I changed the board and the challenges, and when I'm done explaining that to you, I'm gonna get into my TBR for the readathon. First up, the most important rule is that there is only one single rule, and that is that you read anything and as much as possible about the climate crisis and or nature, or something that is at least connected to it. All genres, poetry, non-fiction, fiction, fantasy, whatever it may be, everything is completely allowed as long as it has a strong connection to climate change and or nature. Preferably climate change, but because nature and climate change are very much connected, it counts as either. You can also read any length of book that you want. There's no like minimum page count or anything like it. Again, genre doesn't matter. You can double up on the prompts, and the prompts in general are completely optional. If you are not in the mood to go along with the prompts that I'm going to introduce to you, feel free to just read whatever you want. As long as it is connected to the climate crisis and or nature, you are free to go and you have participated in the readathon. We also have a group book this time around, which again, of course, just like the prompts, is completely optional. And the book is called All We Can Save, which is a book I wanted to read for the longest time, and actually comes as a very high recommendation from Anya from Well Traveled Books, who is my co-host this year in the CLIMATHON. I will leave her channel linked down below. She is lovely, she's amazing. You should follow her if you're interested in books, travel and plants and sustainability. She is incredible. And she has been recommending me this book a billion times. So for her, it will be a reread. For me, it will be the first time that I'm gonna read it. And whoever wants to join us in reading this book is more than welcome. And one last thing before we get into the challenges themselves, if you do have Storygraph, if you use that platform, the CLIMATHON is on Storygraph, and I'm gonna leave it linked down below if you want to officially participate on Storygraph and track your reading and add books to different challenges. You are more than welcome. Okay, now let me finally explain the challenges to you, because there is a big difference to how I used to do it in the past. In the past, I used to have like a general challenge board with a bunch of challenges that you could use however you wanted to. But this time around, I decided to make teams. I have 3 teams: Team Water, Team Earth, and Team Human, with 3 challenges each. You can still treat this board as a bingo board and aim to complete all 9 challenges and either read 9 books, or, as I said, you can double up and just read as many books as you want and try to complete the entire board. But you can also just choose a team and therefore only have 3 prompts, because I do understand that even for me, who loves this topic and is so passionate about it and like deals with it almost on a daily basis, it can be hard to complete all of the challenges, especially if you're like someone who's very ambitious and wants to read just one book for each challenge. That can be a lot because the climate crisis is a very depressing topic sometimes, and it can make you very angry and emotional. And if you're someone who also leans more into nonfiction, which makes a lot of sense for this readathon, then yeah, it can be a lot. So I decided to make teams with 3 prompts each to make it a bit easier and to make it a bit more fun. If you are choosing a team, please let me know down in the comments below which team you're choosing. First, we are going to discuss the team water, and the first prompt is to read a book set at or in water. This can be a book about something at or in the ocean. It can be a book about rivers or lakes, or just a general book about water, for example, how important a water ecosystem is for the earth or for certain people, for example, for indigenous communities, or it can be how water as a resource for us humans, like drinking water, how important that is and how that influences everything regarding the climate crisis. It can also be a book about mermaids, if you find one that is also connected to the crisis, or anything along those lines. It doesn't need to be the ocean, it can definitely be lakes or rivers as well. The second prompt is very self-explanatory because it is to read a book with a snowy or icy setting. So anywhere where there's a lot of snow or a lot of ice, it doesn't need to be the poles, it can just be winter somewhere, is definitely valid for this prompt. Just please remember to keep the connection to the whole climate situation. The third and last prompt for Team Water is to read something about life in the ocean. As you are all probably aware, the oceans are at great risk and the life in it is too. And that even though we don't know barely anything about what's actually going on in this fascinating, massive ecosystem out there. And yeah, this prompt is to read anything about whales, dolphins, sharks, coral reefs, algae, fish, or also seabirds, or if you want, that is like the almost exception in this prompt, I would also count books about very tiny isolated islands here as well. So like even human life, it's not only animals or plants in the ocean, also human life amidst the ocean. Or for example, people that live on boats would count as well. Or very tiny islands, for example, like Tonga or something along those lines. The next team is Team Earth, and the first prompt for this is read a book about plants. This again can be interpreted in whatever way you wish. You can read a book about herbs, vegetables, fruits, forests, trees, ecosystems that are plant dominated, for example, the rainforest, or how different plants are important to us humans to survive, or important for the ecosystem of the entire planet, and so on and so forth. As long as it has a focus on plants, it counts. The second prompt is very similar. It is to read a book about animals or the animal extinction. For this prompt, it does not matter if it is about pet animals or wild animals, endangered animals or animals that are not endangered. If it is a very general book about animals or about a specific type of animal, that is completely up to you. As long as it has a focus on animals or the animal extinction, it is valid. Just please do not read anything about zoos or the mistreatment of animals or wild pets or anything like that unless the book is critical of it, because of course this is about protecting animals and not harming them further. And the last challenge for Team Earth is very vague, and I like it like that. And that is to read a book about Earth. And Earth here does not necessarily mean the planet, it means more like Earth as the place that we're walking on. This can be a book about the soil, this can be a book about fungi, this can be about how nature is connected to one another, so like a general book about nature, if you will. It can be a book about gardening, about the weather, about geology, yes, volcanoes, for example, or rocks, mountains, anything like that, landscapes. Basically anything that does not center humans and human life in its premise is completely valid for this prompt. And the final team, Team Human. The first one is very straightforward. Read a book by an indigenous author. Indigenous people are on the forefront of the fight against the climate crisis, and they face very harsh discrimination. They face genocide and they face murder by corporations, and it's very rough if you look deeper into it. I'm not saying you need to read a book that shows you that truth in all its detail, because it can be very rough, even though I think it's very important that we know about it. But this prompt is really just to read a book by an indigenous author. It doesn't need to be indigenous from North America. It can be indigenous from anywhere on the globe, as long as it is from an indigenous author. For this prompt, it counts. The second prompt in Team Human is again a very vague one, and that is to read a book about change. This could be a book about the climate change movement, about activism, about possible alternatives or solutions that we're currently exploring, about a book about hope, a book about revolution or rebellion, be it past or present, a book about the Anthropocene, yada, yada, yada. Everything that focuses change is for this prompt. And for this prompt, there's actually an exception to the general rules, because we all know that minority groups and groups that are discriminated against face a lot more consequences of the climate crisis, and they are often at the forefront of the fight against it. So if you have a book that, for example, talks about the history of rights for transgender people, queer people, BIPOC people, those are completely valid even if they do not have any climate change relation at first glance. They are still completely valid for this prompt, just to empower them and to learn more about it, and also to learn more about different ways of change, revolution and rebellion that has happened in the past or in the present moment. That is all important to create a better world. And the last prompt in Team Human is to read a book about consumerism and or capitalism. This again can be nonfiction or fiction, as long as it deals with these topics critically. It can be a book about a specific industry, for example, the fast fashion industry and how harmful it is. It can be a book about possible alternative systems, or just a history of how consumerism or capitalism has impacted our planet, or how it even came to be. As long as it is connected to these topics, you're good to go. Then we have 3 bonus prompts, one of them being bookish and the other 2 have nothing to do with reading, so no extra books added. But the first one is to read the group book. That would be a bonus point. Again, the book is All We Can Save, and that would actually fit the prompt for read a book about change in Team Human. The second bonus point is to post on social media about something related to the climate crisis. It can just be something that you're very passionate about, like an issue, for example, that you're very passionate about. It can be about this readathon and what books you're reading for it. It can be about steps that you personally are taking to get better at sustainability, or it can be about topics where you're like, hey, I would like to get better at this area in my life, or I would like to gather more information about this and this issue. Community, please help me. How can I move on from here? Whatever it is, as long as it is connected to the climate crisis and you post on social media with the hashtag CLIMATHON, it's good to go. And the third bonus point is the same as last year, and that is to watch a documentary about, again, the climate crisis and or nature. I think that is very self-explanatory, but I think it's important to also visually see the world that we are currently losing and to learn more about it. And yeah, those are all the prompts. Now to my personal TBR for the readathon. I don't know how much I'm gonna read. I actually delayed the readathon from September to November in the hopes that I would have more time, but as it looks like, it's quite the opposite at this point. But we're going with it and I'm going to try my best. I know that this year I have been able to read between like 3 or 5 books in average per month. So I'm aiming for 4 books on my TBR, on my set TBR, but I have a few extra mentions that if by any chance I have more time and more energy to read, I can go for these as well. And by the way, I did not choose a team because I couldn't decide. I wanted to do all of them, so that is what I did, kind of. I will probably not complete it as a bingo board with all 9 challenges, but I have books for every challenge. I'm doubling up, so that is possible without overwhelming myself. But yeah, I'm treating the prompts as a bingo board. The first book that I've already mentioned is All We Can Save, which I will read for the prompt of change and as the group book. Then we have the book The Ice by Lalina Powell, which counts for the icy setting, and also a book that is critical about capitalism. I have read a book by Lalina Powell before called The Bees, which is very interesting. I've never read a book like this before or after. It's very unique, and I've been eager to read something else by the author ever since. And this one seems to be absolutely perfect for this readathon, so I'm very excited to dive into it. Let me quickly read you the description of The Ice by Lalina Powell, because I have a hard time summarizing it.
It's the day after tomorrow, and the Arctic Sea has melted. While global business carves up on the new frontier, cruise ships race each other to ever rarer wildlife sightings. The passengers of the Vanir have come seeking a polar bear. What they find is even more astonishing: a dead body. It is Tom Harding, lost in an accident 3 years ago, and now revealed by the melting ice of the Midgard Glacier. Tom had come to Midgard to help launch the new venture of his best friend of 30 years, Sean Carson, a man whose business relies on discretion and powerful connections, and who was the last person to see him alive. Their friendship had been forged by a shared obsession with Arctic exploration, and although Tom's need to save the world often clashed with Sean's desire to conquer it, Sean has always believed that underneath it all, they shared the same goals. But as the inquest into Tom's death begins, the choices made by both men, in love and in life, are put on the stand. And when cracks appear in the foundations of Sean's glamorous world, he is forced to question what price he has really paid for a seat at the establishment's table. Just how deep do the lies go?
This sounds horrifyingly accurate for our current times, and I'm very excited and terrified. The next book on my list is called Below the Edge of Darkness, and this is a book that deals with life in the deep sea. And I will read this, of course, for life in the ocean and also for animals. And the last book on my set TBR is called Books and Islands, and this fulfills the water prompt, like read a book set at or in water, because it deals a lot with lakes and rivers, but also the prompt for read a book by an indigenous author. The author is very popular. I've never read anything by them, but I'm very excited to finally dive into their work. With these 4 books, I would still not complete the entire bingo board, but as I said, I have some extra books on my list that are just there in case I have time. The first one being Lab Girl by Hope Jaren, not sure how to pronounce the last name, I'm sorry. But this one would count for plants and earth, exactly, because it talks about like the science of trees and soil. However, I'm a bit torn on this one, because what I've read online, it might be less about trees and science than about a love story, and I'm not really interested to read about that, I'm sorry. Especially not during this readathon, that would be a waste of time. So if anybody has read it, please let me know down in the comments below if this book is worth my time for the CLIMATHON, or if I should opt it out for another book that fits those prompts. Another book that I would really love to read, which actually only fulfills the animals prompt, is The Insect Crisis. I have this book on my radar for the longest time. I know basically nothing about insects. I just know that they're very, very crucial to a functioning environment, and that we have gotten rid of, I don't even know how many. I don't want to say any fictional number, but we have gotten rid of so many of them. I remember when I was a little kid and we would drive to my family, which was quite a long ride. We would drive on the highway, and the windshield, I think it's called in English, was full of dead insects. And now you drive the same distance and you have like 3 spots and that's it. Because we have completely drove insects to extinction without ever even knowing what they're doing for the environment and how important they are. So I think this is like such a crucial, important book, and I really want to get to it. If not during the CLIMATHON, then sometime soon. And the last book on my potential TBR is a book that unfortunately doesn't seem to fit any of the prompts of the CLIMATHON. Maybe after I read it, I see that it does fit, but so far, with me having only read the description, it doesn't fit to any of the prompts, but it does 100% fit into the CLIMATHON, and that is Notes from the Burning Age by Claire North. And I've read something by the author before. I cannot for the life of me remember the book title of that book, but I loved it. I think it was like the 1,000 Lives of Harry August or something like that. If I remember, I will put the cover here. I wanted to read more by the author ever since, and when I saw that this book was coming out, ever since release day, I have been on it and I wanted to read it because it is a climate fiction dealing with a potential future of what happens long after we have wrecked our own species with climate change. So yeah, I'm very excited for that, and it would definitely fit this month so well, so I would love to get around to this. So this is it. I hope some of you will join me and Anya, my co-host. Again, she's linked in the description box below. I hope you're going to join us for the CLIMATHON, either here on YouTube, just in your private home, or on Storygraph, link down below. I am so excited for this readathon. It is so near and dear to my heart. I hope a lot of you are going to join. Please remember, the only rule you really have to follow, despite all the prompts I just talked about, but the only rule you really have to follow is to read about the climate crisis and or nature. And that's it. That's all. And yeah, I hope a lot of you will join me. I'm very excited and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.